All right. Well, today on Hope for the Helpers, we are with Miss Polly. She is just an amazing human that I just love so much. She is a certified peer in more than one state, has done all sorts of great things in her recovery journey. And before I just go on and say things that may not be accurate, I'm going to let her introduce herself and share what kind of certifications she has to start with, and then we're going to get into some wonderful things for families to hear from someone that is in long-term recovery themselves, but also experienced um, some mental health and substance use in her own family, her own core family. Is that correct?
Right.
So I think she's going to share some of both of those things. I think this will be a wonderful interview for families to listen to. So, Polly, tell us about you.
First of all, thank you for not, I mean, thank you for having me, but like, thank you for doing this. Thank you for taking the time just to volunteer to get the message out to help people who might need that connection, because that's really what it's about. No matter what
It
it
is.
is that we are navigating or trying to overcome or struggling with or bouncing back from, it's that connection with another person that's going to help us be able to turn that experience into something meaningful. So thank you.
Right. Oh, yeah.
So my name's
Yeah.
Polly Jessen. I'm a certified peer recovery specialist in Tennessee, and I'm a registered peer recovery specialist in Virginia. I also have a specialty endorsement with crisis services, so I specialize in crisis situations. Um, I don't know where you want me to start. Like, you want me to start with maybe like my personal experience with a family member, or
Well, tell us first, yes, tell us first of all a little bit about you growing up and what you experienced with substance use and or mental health in your own immediate family and how that affected you in one way or another, positively, negatively, all the things. Because you can make anything out of something, right?
yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm not unique. You know what I mean? I think almost everybody has some linkage or connection to a family member who's struggled with mental health or substance use. You know, it's a disease and it doesn't discriminate. And that's something that I learned later on. I was born in the early 80s in Northeast Tennessee, and my family was an upper middle class family, and my father was a medical professional. So, you know, it was like this facade of the perfect family, which in a lot of ways we were. I had a wonderful childhood. I had
Hmm.
opportunities. I was close with my brother, my mom. I was close with my father, but he struggled with alcohol use disorder. And that was something that I became aware of as I got a little bit older when I started noticing the symptoms and the effects of that. And I'll tell you, like, back then, I mean, in the 80s and even in the 90s, like we didn't talk about stuff like that with people.
Yeah.
I wasn't aware of like friends going to see a counselor or, all we knew was drugs are bad, don't do them without any real context or support um,
Yeah.
or validation about that being, a disease. So it had a
Mhm.
negative stigma for decades that I can remember. So that was something that I didn't tell anybody. And
Yeah.
I'll say like he wasn't violent, he wasn't abusive, but he was absent.
Mhm.
And he would work all day and he would support our family and he was there for us and stuff like in that regard, but he wasn't there physically or emotionally.
Yeah.
And that really, really affected my self-esteem, my sense of identity, my uh, like you said, some things that were negative we can turn into positive, but it's like, I became motivated to perform, to try to do things to get attention.
Mhm.
And I was an overachiever. I was in all the honors classes. I played sports. I had scholarship offers, all the things. But, I can remember, gosh, I have a 7-year-old right now in the first grade and thinking of being seven again. You know what I'm saying? Like I can remember in the first grade having my first suicidal thoughts. And that's not typical. And I think I don't know where that came from. I don't know if it was some sort of mental health challenge that had already started that was unrelated to my father's alcoholism, but I don't know. There is a connection with family members with mental health issues
Yeah.
genetically, just like
Hmm.
there is substance use disorder. And I really do. I don't blame anybody, but I do think that my story started with struggling with mental health challenges, not being able to name it,
Hmm.
like very, very early.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, um,
It's so funny that you say that, and I don't want to just
hmm,
pause where you are because my story is so similar. My dad, um, he never identified as an alcoholic, but his father, my grandfather on my paternal side, was an alcoholic and died from complications from alcoholism. My dad, in my early years, when I was, grade school, maybe junior high age, but right in that time frame, he drank a lot. Now, in his later years, he drank none, but he drank a lot. I don't know. I can't really say he was an alcoholic, but it was teetering on that for sure. And my experience and the way I dealt with that is just like yours. I was an overachiever, all the extra things he would, and my mom never said, anything about grades, but my dad would say, well, if you got to have an A, well, why can't you get an A plus? I was in the band. Well, you can't be second chair. Why are you not first chair? And if I was first chair, well, he was like, well, is there a competition or something you can go to for the state or the region or something? And if you weren't that, he didn't criticize you, but it was his way of pushing, 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 pushing. And I never felt like I was good enough ever
I did
because,
that to myself. Like,
mhm,
I mean, my dad, that's the thing. Like, he was proud of me no matter what, which, I mean,
yeah,
and he did acknowledge my successes, but it's like, I put that pressure on myself.
yeah, I
And
did too.
I was going to make a joke about like first and second chair. I played the trumpet in middle school, and
Hmm.
I intentionally messed up just enough to not get first chair. So I didn't have to do the solo, but I could still be second chair. That was too much responsibility.
But it's so crazy because now as an adult, and I've known this for years now, that was his way of showing love to me
Mm.
because he had no parental supervision growing up. And that was, his way of parenting and almost overdoing, by saying, well, you need to, da, da, da. And, if you got 100, well, he knew you could get extra credit. Why are you doing the extra credit? Why are you not doing that? It's, you know, it was always one little step more. He was never satisfied unless it was one little step more. And then you did that, and it was one little step more. And so I put on myself the pressure, like you were saying, to achieve more, do more, all of that, and which that was the ultimate lead into my own addiction and how all that started. So let's get back to your story, but I just want to
No,
identify
it's
with
our
you that
story.
way.
You know what I'm saying? It
Yeah,
really is
yeah,
like this, everything like recovery and what we go through. It's the same thing expressed in different ways throughout our
yeah.
family
Hmm.
systems. So,
Hmm.
um, you know, I totally identify with that. And it was a thing like I had just this empty sense of self where I vacillated between these extremes of, you know, feeling like I was worthless and I was nobody. And then at the same time, I was on top of the world because I achieved something and did well, or I helped a friend or whatever. And I just had no sense of balance as to like who I really was. And I really
Hmm.
judged myself based on like achievements and outward things. I made it a point, like I say this all the time, and it's still relevant in some ways, but growing up, I never felt like I fit in anywhere.
Yeah.
So I made sure that I fit in everywhere.
Yeah. Hmm.
I became a little bit of everything so that I didn't have to sit with myself, you
The
know?
ultimate caterpillar that can, become whatever is around us. We mirror whatever it is. Yeah.
Yeah. But in doing that, I created really good relationships and I had meaningful friendships and I had a lot of support. But I think the shame and guilt came because I was hiding all my fears inside, even from the people closest to me.
Yeah.
Um, and just
Mhm.
internalized all that shame. So, going through school, I did really well. I enjoyed it. I was well liked. I had a lot of friends. I was good at stuff. But I just carried that pain inside, and I blamed my father for it, even though now I can see he had a disease of addiction himself, and it wasn't intentional. He didn't not love me. Like, he
Right.
couldn't overcome that, and at that time. And I want to say too, just like at the very beginning right now, he's been sober since 2007.
Oh my word. Yay. So
So
great. So great.
we have a family story of recovery too. I ended up starting to use substances in high school when I found out my mom was diagnosed with breast cancer, and
Mhm.
I wasn't like emotionally developed enough to handle that at all. So I did what I saw him do. And honestly, in my mind, I was thinking, like, I can't sit with this pain anymore. Um, I'll just do what my dad does and not have to deal with it, because that's what it
Yeah.
appears, like it. So nothing bothers him. So I actually went and stole all sorts of alcohol from his shop and went to my room and sat on the floor and made a conscious decision. A lot of kids get into addiction just like, experimenting or whatever, going to parties or this and that. Nah, dude, I made a conscious decision to become intoxicated in that moment and see what it felt like. And I remember just cracking open can after can and chugging two or three, throw up in the floor, chug two or three more. Like, I mean, I went through a case in like an hour. And I remember, man, like it was maybe 20 minutes after I'd downed a couple. I remember looking down at my arms, and like the hair was kind of standing. I had goosebumps on my skin, like a physical reaction to it. And I remember thinking, wow, it was like my whole body sighed. And I was like, this is why he does that.
Yeah.
I get it now. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? And it was
Yeah.
this really weird toxic connection I had in my mind with alcohol being a solution. Back in the 90s too. I mean, this isn't funny. I'm not haha funny, but it's like back in the 90s, we take
Way
water
back.
bottles. Yeah, like I was taking water bottles to school with vodka in them. I was playing in golf tournaments with liquor. Like, I mean, I was hiding bottles in suitcases in the closet in the house, and like I was drinking alcoholically almost immediately after that first time. So
That quick. Hmm.
yes, because it was
Yes.
like, I don't know, it was like a miracle, and it worked. And I'll say that
Yeah.
too. I kept doing it because it worked until it didn't. And then I
Yeah.
couldn't stop.
Yeah. Same thing with me. The first time I took a hydrocodone, it was a five, or was, yeah, it was a five. And I thought, oh, wow, this is what I should have been feeling like since I can ever remember my migraines starting when I was in the like fifth grade.
Relief.
And yeah, and I was like, finally, I don't have pain. And so I can actually see straight. I can actually perform. And that was, I can do better at the things that I want to do better at because I don't have any pain anymore. And of course, just like you, it worked and worked and worked and worked. And I became more successful as an adult in my career. And then it was like, whoa, now I'm not, now I can't, you know, the
I mean,
plateau.
like, I loved who I was. I didn't
Mhm.
question my worth. Like, I mean, it was amazing how it just turned off the parts of my brain that I was fighting against. Um, but man, that didn't last very long.
Yeah.
My mother passed away 2 weeks before the prom, my senior prom, which was just a few weeks before graduation.
Hmm.
Um, I completely bottomed out. I lost all sense of uh, purpose, care, regard, respect, responsibility. I didn't even want to play golf anymore. I threw away a scholarship. I got kicked out of college. And I got, what the caveat really to I guess, escalate my downfall was opioids. It was the early 2000s, and she had breast cancer. So when I was going through her cabinets and cleaning her things out, and I find, multiple bottles of like 80 milligram Oxycontin, like that she didn't even take.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, I wonder what these will do,
Yeah.
and so I was, I mean, gosh, maybe within 6 months of trying opioids, I was using IV drugs. I was using street heroin. I mean, the thing about how dangerous my brain is when I'm in active addiction is that, like, I don't care. And
Yeah.
it doesn't matter. I will hoard my house with trash. I will not bathe for weeks. I will hurt everybody around me. Like, um, I will take risks. It just doesn't matter. And that's a really, really scary
Hmm.
way to live.
Yeah.
And I was so messed up, I wasn't even scared.
So thinking about what you've just said for family members and concerned persons, coworkers, friends, boyfriends, girlfriends, whatever, that are listening, if they have that person in their life that's going through what you've just described, what's the first thing that you would share with them as far as they're reaching out by watching this video? That's their way of reaching out and saying, I have no idea what to do. I don't want to do the wrong thing, but I want to do something. What would be your gut instinct to say?
I would say, first of all, my experience is not everybody's. And what worked for me may not work for someone else, and vice versa. But, I can say that, like, when I was in the deepest, darkest parts of my addiction, there was nothing, like no human power that could have made me change. Like no amount of love, no amount of consequences. Like it really had to come from within me. And I think that it took, a combination of events for that to happen. Like I'm so grateful for my experience with justice involvement. I was in and out of jail for a while, and um, my first experience with recovery was through being court ordered to treatment because I wouldn't have gone otherwise.
Yeah.
Um, but that helped me. Like it was a consequence, but not really because it was an opportunity. And
Hmm.
it really planted some seeds. So I would say that too. I would say, even if someone's loved one may be taking longer to find recovery or seems ambivalent or whatever, like there's seeds being planted all the time. And when I look back at my life and all the people that were there for me, all the, I mean, even counselors, nurses, like ER staff, like I remember the people who were kind, who were helpful, who saw me without judgment, who didn't just throw a packet of resources at me and tell me I'm discharged, that actually sat down with me, whether I followed up with the resources or not. The compassion they showed was what really mattered. And I think in true person centered fashion, sometimes we can maybe just ask people what they need. How do you need to be approached for this to matter? Or, give different options, or, there was things I didn't even know were available at the time.
Hmm.
And I'll say, like, this July, I'll have 14 years of
Hmm.
recovery from substance use, mental health challenges, and self harm. And that's another thing. Sometimes we don't talk a lot about the mental health struggles that are, we have symptoms of. So, that's actually been probably harder in some ways than the alcohol use or the drug use. But just knowing what resources are out there, knowing who to go to, and continuing that love and support, even if you're not seeing outcomes right away, knowing that those seeds are being planted, I
Yeah.
think really makes a difference.
Yeah. And I noticed that you touched on compassion, from the professional side, the professional world, nurses, doctors, whoever that's trying to help you. They can be so clinical at times that it's not helpful. Sometimes just compassion and saying, what do you need? What do you feel you need, and how would you like that given to you? You know?
Yeah, and like non-comparative, like don't compare to others either. It's
Hmm.
like I've seen before where I've heard a family member say like, "Well, so and so did it, why can't you?" And it's like,
Hmm.
uh-uh. What it means to really meet somebody where they are means that we zero in on their situation, their insight, their experience. We don't compare to anybody else's. I don't even, even this last time in recovery, because I have a relapse, a profound relapse in my story. I had a few years clean with a
Hmm.
devastating relapse followed by this last time. But one thing I did to myself that made it more difficult to recover was to compare my recovery to last time and be like,
Oh,
well, gosh, I did it before. Why can't I do it now? Or, you know what I mean? So
yeah,
it's just different. And even to maintain my recovery, I have to do things differently than I did in the beginning.
yeah.
So,
Well, we all grow and evolve and go in such different directions. We're mentally in a different place, we're physically in a different place. We know our age, circumstances in our lives, and all those things, they change, or a constant thing that evolves. And so
mhm.
therefore, how we deal with challenges and things in our lives has to also evolve with that. With that,
I heard such a good quote, and it just like popped into my head. I don't know if you remember Marty Landis. She sponsored me for a long time, and
Mhm.
she said this quote, and I wrote it down because I was like, "That's brilliant." But I think someone else said it anyway. Perfection was stagnation, then heaven would be a swamp.
That's right.
I was like, wow, like I
Yeah,
just stuff like
yeah.
that stuck with me too in early recovery. There was another one I heard, and it's my email signature, and I say this just about every time I speak. But it is a quote by Viktor Frankl, who was a victim of the Holocaust. And the quote is, "The meaning of life is to give life meaning."
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yes.
For someone like me who struggled with identity, with worth and value, and like all these things, like I had even like I had some even in early recovery that like the meaning of my life will just be bestowed upon me and I'll become aware of it and be happy. And it's like, no, you have to go do that. Like
Yeah.
you get to give
Yes, you get
meaning to
to.
your life and all the things you've been through. And like,
You get to choose that and pick that and foster that. Yes.
isn't that's
Yeah,
freedom?
it is. It is. So let's talk a little bit about, you mentioned having justice involvement yourself. And we both come from similar family backgrounds. If a person would look at my family, and it would be like the white picket fence, and they went to church every Sunday, and I have the Sunday school pins and all that, the straight A's, and mom and dad both worked, and they, on the outside everything looked hunky dory, and really it was on the inside too, pretty much, for most years. But, nobody would have ever thought that something like this would happen to our family. Well, you know what? Why wouldn't they think that? My dad had his own struggles. My grandfather died of, I have it on my mom's side too. It is, every family has it. You don't have to look like, a down and outer to have this happen in your own household. And so the fact that, someone went to jail out of your household, oh my gosh, the horror, I'm sure, what in the world do these families need to know about that and how to handle that when they come from, you know, the cookie cutter family life, and they now have a child or a mother or a brother that has done A, B, C, or D because of his substance use
Mhm.
disorder and has landed in the justice system, in jail,
It's the
in
symptom.
prison.
It's a
Mhm.
symptom of the disease. It's
Mhm.
the metaphor we talk about all the time. It's like if you had a neighbor that was suffering with cancer or a debilitating illness, like you'd go visit them, take them out, see what they needed, you know. But the second someone struggles with mental health or substance use, we recoil. We want to place judgment. And I think that just as human beings, we do that out of fear, not out of understanding. Because if there was a real understanding of what the disease was inside a person and how it affected them, there would just be an outpouring of support and funding. And, you know, so I mean, I would just encourage people to not be afraid to talk about their struggles within the family and the effects of them, because that's really how we take the stigma away. You know, I went to jail enough for everybody in my family. Nobody else needs to go now. Um, but it's like, you know, it's part of what happens when someone still needs help. So
Yeah.
just any kind of advocacy, if someone wants to channel that energy into something positive, advocate for more funding for jail-based programs, for justice certified peers to be in the jails and the prisons, and reentry programs, housing that will allow for people with backgrounds to live there. I mean, there's like, we can go down a huge rabbit hole on, like, you know, housing first, harm reduction, doing whatever it is that we can to make that connection and to make that person feel supported to seek the help that's available, because that's what's gonna, you, that person has to have that spark inside happen, or else nothing's gonna work.
Is there anything about the justice system that you feel like is not talked about very much, and people that have not experienced that system need to know about when they have a loved one that enters it? Like, what's the big, like, oh gosh, I didn't know that, or
Well, it's been so long, honestly. That's good to say now. It's been a long time
yay.
since I was in there, but you know, I remember being in there and just feeling very isolated, and you know, I didn't have information that I needed. I didn't know where to go, even within the jail, like for support if I needed
Mhm.
it. And we've come a long way. We've come a really, really long way with that,
Yeah.
especially with mental health treatment inside the jails. We've even got like medication assisted treatment inside the jails now. We've got programs. The local recovery courts are just amazing.
Mhm.
I would encourage people to reach out to the recovery courts, to attend the open hearings, to kind of like see and learn how that process works and what
That's a
there
great
are. And
idea. Hmm.
like if there's opportunities to volunteer um, in different like reentry programs to help individuals transitioning from incarceration into transitional housing, being able to get their GED, jobs. You know, we can, a huge movement for local employers to consider hiring people with backgrounds that are putting in work.
So are
You
you
know,
saying that when the open hearings are for those that are entering recovery court or that are in recovery, those are open hearings? Is that what you're saying?
yeah,
Okay.
all
And
over. I mean, yeah.
yeah, and so if this family member has someone that's just been, put in jail for whatever that's related to their substance use, but they haven't entered recovery court yet, but the family wants to know more about it, go to those courts, those court
Go to
hearings,
anything
sit in.
public.
Yeah, listen and see what happens so that you know how to better direct, your loved one,
Mhm.
and learn from what you hear there about what kind of
Yeah.
services are available of, outside of the jail once they're released, and what kinds of things they have to face. That's a
Yeah,
great
and
way for them to learn.
our local coalitions, our local anti-drug coalitions, will have staff, peers, case managers, all that that work as liaisons with the court
Mhm.
system, who can help provide that information as well.
And so a family member could call, like in Tennessee, it would be like their county anti-drug coalition. In Virginia,
Mhm.
it would be what in Virginia?
I think
The
it's the city court, Bristol, Virginia city court. I would
Mhm.
have to look up the exact name of it, but it can be
Mhm.
Googled just the recovery court, and which judges do that, and just seek information, because
Hmm.
ultimately, being armed with information that's relevant to what's going on, you can give somebody choices they may not have known that
Hmm.
they had.
Yeah.
Um,
And probably, and all across the country, just no matter where somebody's listening from, they could call their local sheriff's office even,
call the
or the
local
police.
courthouse and say, do we
Yeah,
have
and just say,
a
do we have
diversion
recovery?
program?
Right. Do we have recovery court? Do we have mental health court? And who can I get in contact with somebody there to see about learning what all goes on in there because my child or my brother or whatever has just entered, the local jail system and I want to learn more about that for him.
And even if the individual for whatever reason may not meet the criteria for recovery court, you can still ask about resources within the jail that could help that
Hmm.
person in their recovery. What if you're able to send books or workbooks, or schedule phone calls or meetings. There's lots
Hmm.
of technology now that they use in the jails that wasn't around when I was there, that can help people connect.
Such good information. Okay, so let's switch just for a minute because we're getting to the tail end of our time together. Um, So one thing that, my channel is called Hope for the helpers being the concerned persons. And how would you share or what would you share as a way to find hope in this, situation that these families are going through? What are some ways to find hope? Um,
And it's, there are every way there is a way to find hope, and there is a lot of complex family dynamics when we're having someone in our family struggling with substance use or mental health. Actually, we touched on this topic in a group that I did at Mended Women last week, and we got really deep into it, but we talked about just the importance of, like, the family member working on themselves, in the sense of, like, educating themselves about the disease of addiction, trying to be as objective as possible, because it is so hard when you have relationships and feelings and attachments and stuff. But trying your best to be objective, to understand what's happening, and to really do your best to take care of yourself, learn what you need to learn, to not be obsessed with the outcome for that
mhm.
person that you love. I think there's a word for it clinically. We call that codependence, but it's not really. I don't, what I'm saying, don't take that lightly. But codependence can be quite severe, and it can take over your life. You can become obsessed with that other person's life. You can attach yourself to outcomes. And one of the things an individual shared in that group, was, like, they said, I wish my family member could let go of the idea that I'm going to become the person I was again. You know what I mean? Like, it's like, oh, I just wish I could have my Polly back when she was, you know, that makes it hard for someone to recover, because they know what it was like to be that child or that person before addiction too, and they know all the struggles after that. And it's like, there's no way I could ever go back to being that
No,
person, but
no.
I can become a new person. I can develop a new relationship with you based on who I'm becoming now, because my experience matters.
Hmm.
So, just encouraging the loved ones to understand that our experience in active addiction really matters
Hmm.
for our recovery, and that, like, there is probably a grief process for the family member to let go of that person they knew before addiction took over, and they need
Hmm.
to take responsibility for that and grieve that process, while also leaving the door open for the hope of their loved one to become the person that they can be in recovery, and to
Right.
develop new relationships with that foundation. Does that make
I
sense?
love that. Yeah. Yes. Absolutely, it does. Um, and that's all of that is just so valuable, and all these little nuggets that you're sharing are so good. I wish I could just bottle you up and like have you talked for like 4 hours. No.
I love
But,
that, when we talk about like unconditional love, and that's what we have for our family members. That's what, I have,
yeah.
my higher power has for me. And it's sometimes I lose sight of that when I put expectations on others. And
Mhm.
as long as I expect something from you, I can't unconditionally meet you where you are.
Yeah.
So to be able to hold on to that love and that hope for that person to become educated, to take care of ourselves, but to also realize that, you know, no human power can relieve someone else's addiction.
So good. So, so good. Okay. Any final thoughts before we close up?
Oh, I got so many. No, I'm just, man, I don't know. I'm great. Like I'm grateful and I'm humbled and I'm always learning something new and I'm always trying to get something meaningful out of all of my relationships, not in the selfish way that I used to, but in the way that I really value what I have now.
Hmm.
And like, gosh, that makes me like that. I mean, just peer support,
Yeah.
what we do
Hmm.
and that how we connect with that, like with that grace and humility that we have with each other. I just want to be able to show that to other people. And if people are struggling, that like anybody can get help and get better. Like anybody can. I've not
Yes.
met one person that can't do it, but I've met a lot of people that won't. And I
That's,
used to be that,
yes. Yeah.
but man, not
Yes.
today. It ain't worth it. My
Yeah.
life is too good, and there's a miracle for everybody.
Yes. Well, I want to thank you so much for spending your time out of your work day. And I know you have, and I say this when I've been interviewing everyone, I know you have another job to go to, and I have another job to go to, so I'm not going to keep us in longer, but this was just so powerful. And there's going to be tons and tons of people that will gain lots of hope and lots of insight from what you've shared. And I'm so proud to know you. Just so proud.
I admire you so much. Thank you. And this, honestly, this was the most important thing that I could have done with my time. And I believe that, like, sometimes I don't know, we put value on certain things when really what we're doing right now matters more than anything.
Yeah.
So thank you for everything.
Okay.